You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to episode number 160 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. My name is Kevin O'Shea, and I am the host of the Just Japan podcast, a podcast that each and every week brings you a different topic about life right here in Japan. Now, I'm a Canadian who has been living in Japan for 9 years. I call Kobe, Japan, home. I live here with my wife, my 2 kids. Yeah. It's pretty cool. And this week we've got another great episode coming your way. An awesome one, a very unique one as far as the Just Japan podcast goes. We're certainly not revisiting old material. That's right. We're going to be talking to a wrestler, a pro wrestler, a pro amateur wrestler. Well, we're going to be talking to an American guy who lives and works in Japan, and he also does a lot of wrestling. That's really cool. We're going to be talking to the Half-Assed Dragon. That's right, the Half-Assed Dragon, based out of Nagano, Japan. So stay tuned for an awesome episode of the Just Japan podcast. Oh so busy, oh so busy. That is the story of my life. Oh my gosh, guys, the last few weeks have been nothing but a blur. Work has been crazy off the hook. I'm recording this on Saturday night. I did the interview last night on Friday. It's the 27th right now of May. Tomorrow, it's Sunday. I'll be working all day, a full-on day. It's my school's big festival, the biggest day of the year at my school. Essentially, we have a giant Matsuri/carnival at my school all day. And, we have a big production company that comes and sets it all up. They set up stages and tents and things. But it's we, the teachers and staff members at the school, who will be kind of getting it going, making sure everything runs. And then cleaning everything up when it's done. So it's going to be a busy day. I'll have Monday off in lieu, but I can't really go off and do really anything too exciting on Monday because we have construction workers are showing up at our apartment to replace all of the windows in our apartment. It's something they're doing in the entire building. It's free. Our windows, especially our screen doors, don't work very well. We bought them 9 years ago. Out of our own pocket, and it cost a lot of money to get they were the custom screen doors, but for whatever reason, the owners of the building, they're putting them all in for free, so we can't argue. So it's supposed to take, I think they say, about 4 hours to do like an installation. So so that's gonna be happening on Monday, my day off. But it'll be cool because we'll have sliding doors that actually slide, as opposed to having to force them and pull them and have them pop out of their tracks constantly and having to pop them back into the tracks, which is kind of the battle we face now. So that's what's going on with me, but work's been nuts. So I've been really busy. It's been difficult for me to get the podcast out as early as I would like, but we're getting it out. We're doing it. And we've got a really cool episode. So here in the Kansai region of Japan, things are warming up, folks. Things are warming up indeed. Things are getting hot. They're getting hot. Summer is quickly approaching. Temperatures are hitting in the high 20s. And it definitely feels like it. Not impressed. I'm not a fan of this. You guys will know that I cycle to school every day. I cycle to work. And I, in the winter months, I can actually wear my work clothes. But now I'm having to pack my work clothes in a bag and just wear a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and then kind of clean myself up once I get to work and change into my work clothes, because if I wore the work clothes on the bike on the way in, I'd be a sweaty old mess, and that wouldn't be fair to anyone. Absolutely not. So there you go. Now, episode 160, here we are. Of course, the show notes will be at justjapanstuff.com. You can find us over there. One thing I have to admit is that I did lose my voice this week, so it's still kind of recovering. Kind of sounds a bit better now, but in the interview I did with David Williams, the Half-Assed Dragon, you might hear some squeaks and cracks, and it sounds a bit like I'm going through reverse puberty, but I'm really not. It's a broken voice. That's all, guys. Come on. All right, in some kind of Japan community news, blogosphere, Twittersphere, world, writers world news, I would like to share some cool news with you guys out there, especially those of you who are in Japan or you really love Japan and you're aspiring writers. There's a writing contest I want to share with you guys, and this is put on by Craig in Japan from the Gray, Grizzled, and Gaijin think tank over at craiginjapan.wordpress.com. So there's going to be a writing contest, and all the link will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com, so go check it out. But posted yesterday, blog post 210 on the Gray, Grizzled, and Gaijin think tank website, the first annual Gray, Grizzled, and Gaijin guest blog writing contest. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the blog post itself to tell you a little bit about what's going on. So Craig, who runs the blog, this week he hit 4,000 followers on Twitter. So in celebration, the Gray, Grizzled, and Gaijin thought we would offer an opportunity for expats in Japan and other writers to get a little prize or recognition for their content creation. So basically what's going on is there is a writing contest you can submit to Craig, and you could win some App Store, iTunes cards. Yeah. So how does it go here? I'm going through. So a fee is not required to enter. All Gray, Grizzled, and Gaijin guest blog contest submissions must be received by 5 p.m. Japan time on Saturday, June 24th this year. Submissions will only be acceptable online by DM on Twitter to @CraigHoffman11. So you have to have a Twitter account. Limit 1 entry per person. So let's see here. Submission requirements. Let's see, at least 500 words, no more than 1,000 words. It must promote a positive image of Japan. It must be original. Each submission shall be in English and no photographs. The grand prize winner may be asked to submit such media later. Yeah, so there's a writing contest. You can win some iTunes cards and stuff. This is a great community building thing, I think, as far as the kind of the Japan writers community. So check it out. There will be a link in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com with all the information, or go to craiginjapan.wordpress.com and check out the contest information there. Now, of course, guys, I'm going to pimp this out. It's my new project, my kind of nature conservation, getting out there, getting better at wildlife photography, nature photography, promoting stuff. Go check out my Facebook page, Bugs in Asia. This is something that I'm doing here in Japan right now, and when I head off to China, I'll be continuing it there. So check out my nature photography, my writing about conservation and teaching children to appreciate nature and love nature and all that stuff. Go to facebook.com/bugsofasia. And there's more than just pictures of bugs. There's cool information about conservation and environmental awareness and teaching children about the natural world and nature education. So go check it out. Please like the page. I would really appreciate it if you would. There'll be a link to it in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. And on that note, and by the way, follow me on Twitter at jlandkev and on Instagram at jlandkev. Okay, on that note, folks, sit back, get ready, get comfortable. Oh yeah, it's time for the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast, episode number 160, where I talk to a wrestler here in Japan. Sweet. Nice. This is a fun one, guys. All right, folks out there in Just Japan podcast land, welcome to episode number 160 of the Just Japan podcast. And this week we're interviewing A wrestler, that's right. The half-assed dragon. That's the English name of this fella. This week, I'm very happy to have guest Dave Williams join us for the podcast. Dave, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Now, you were. I have to admit, I also want to give a little shout out to a friend of the show, Oren Heath,
Hmm.
who I was put in contact with you through Oren. So thank you, Oren, so much for introducing me to someone with a very interesting story. Yeah, so Dave, could you tell the Just Japan podcast listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're doing here in Japan?
Sure. Well, I'm from the USA. I'm from Seattle, Washington. I've been studying Japanese for over 20 years. I
Oh
kind of
wow.
ended up in a Japanese program in high school and loved it. Did an exchange in Tokyo. Um, Studied off and on. Moved here. Lived in Aichi for a while.
Okay.
Ended up moving to Nagoya about a year, not Nagano. Sorry, I always get the Nagoya and Nagano confused. But ended up moving here to Nagano City about a year and a half ago.
Great. So, wow. So I'm gonna backtrack right away.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, yeah. So you've been studying Japanese for about 20 years.
Hmm.
Wow. So, how did you find yourself in a Japanese program in school?
So Japanese was one of the four languages offered at my high school,
Hmm.
and the others were German, French, and Spanish. And so I wanted to study German as my first choice and Japanese as my second, but German classes got canceled, so I ended up in Japanese class.
Okay. Wow. So you
Yeah.
find yourself in Japanese class, and you did an exchange while in high school.
Yeah, there's a program called YFU, major international exchange program,
Okay.
and they had what was called the Japan America Friendship Scholarship. So I applied for that and got that. So I got a free exchange program in Tokyo for summer vacation in my 10th grade year.
Oh wow. So, what was that experience like like I should say in a nutshell, coming to Japan by yourself, I assume,
Hmm.
at such a young age.
Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting into. So my teacher was an American guy who learned Japanese in the Navy.
Okay.
And so that year, I had to leave school a little bit early. So I asked him about how to make up for the final test, and he just gave me 1,000 yen and said, "Buy a Big Mac on me. That'll teach you more than any test will." And so I ended up doing an exchange at a high school there, and they had me join a club, right? And so they gave me the choice of kendo or judo, and
Okay.
I was on my high school wrestling team, and some of my friends in my class knew that, so they kind of urged me to join judo, even though I thought the sword looked so cool and everything. So I ended up doing judo, which is like wrestling but with choke holds and some different types of moves,
Hmm.
and just had an amazing time, and
Nice.
had a very gracious host family, and just really, it was a really life changing experience. Obviously, set the course for the next several years.
Cool. So a very positive experience during your high school exchange, judo.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you did wrestling in high school. I mean, I guess I suppose. Well, okay. I'll get into that a little bit later. More.
Okay, sure.
I'm gonna focus more on the kind of Japan interest. So you went through high school. You finished high school.
Mhm.
You get into university. So once you got into university, did you kind of was Japan? Did you have eyes on the prize of getting to Japan, or did you kind
Uh-huh.
of get here accidentally?
Man, both. So I had, I applied to a few schools, and a couple of the schools, accepted me based on Japanese. And then the school I ended up going to is called the Evergreen State College in
Okay.
Olympia, Washington. And that's an alternative arts program. My other big thing is arts. And they were the only school in Washington that had a film program and also a Japanese program.
Okay.
So I ended up going there, and the way the scheduling worked out, like they offered Japanese every other year, and I didn't get into the film program the year I wanted to. So I kind of like studied Japanese in a roundabout way, and ended up giving it up for a few years, but then eventually I got back into it and came back to Japan somewhat by mistake.
Okay, cool. Somewhat by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so in Japan, so okay now, so I suppose let's fast forward.
Sure.
It's 2017. You're in Japan now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've already mentioned something about wrestling. So
Yes.
okay. Can you tell us? And I'm going to put links, of course, in the show notes at
Mm-hmm.
justjapanstuff.com to your Facebook page, and I'm going to tell all of you guys out there to go like Dave's Facebook page.
Please do.
It's entertaining. Go out there, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And again, the links below, and we'll mention the actually, yeah, we'll mention the link later several times. Um, so um, you're doing some wrestling here in Japan.
Yes. Yes, I am.
So how I now Oren, I'm going to mention him
Mm-hmm.
again. Oren, thank you for hooking us up here. Oren mentioned that, hey, I've got a friend who's a wrestler here in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not the kind of Olympic or Greco-Roman style.
Yes.
And I went, hey, and then he sent me a link to your Facebook page, and I went, oh, I want to talk to this guy, because I have to admit, I've been in Japan for 9 years. I've met a lot of
Mm-hmm.
really interesting, cool people who do a lot of cool things. I've certainly not met anyone doing what you're doing, which is why I really wanted
Yeah.
you on the show.
It's
Uh,
a little bit unique.
yeah, so who is the Half-Assed Dragon? What is the Half-Assed Dragon? How did it all begin? Tell us your story.
Okay. The half-assed dragon was an idea I had when I was doing taekwondo in Seattle a couple years before I moved back to Japan.
Okay.
And so I had this idea, being a film student and being an artist and a writer, I'm always coming up with ideas for scenarios. And so a lot of Seattle, there's tons of karate schools, taekwondo schools. Bruce Lee is buried in Seattle. My mother was a karate teacher. My first sport was karate. And growing up in the 80s and 90s, there were all these like American Ninja type movies and stuff like that.
Oh,
And I
absolutely.
always thought they were a little bit half-assed. So I just kind of thought of, and sometimes you'll have this different type of karate named after a dragon or something. So my first thought was to make it like the half-assed dragon style. So that was like the seed of it. And then I ended up moving to Nagano and just kind of bored in a new town. I ended up going to watch a wrestling show for New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
And then I knew there was this Shinshu Pro Wrestling in town. And, I'd always loved the drama and the cheesiness and the action of professional wrestling. And I figured I might as well give them an email and see if I could join them and kind of start bringing this half-assed dragon thing to life.
Wow. Okay. So you arrive in. So okay. So I'm already kind of getting this kind of theme from
Mm-hmm.
your background, the things you've already said, that you have kind of consistently had throughout your life this kind of background in martial arts, fighting.
Yes.
So you're a wrestler. You've done judo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming when you're in high school, when you said you were on the wrestling team, was that Olympic style wrestling?
Yeah, it's called college style or folk style.
Okay.
And so basically, like Olympic style wrestling is freestyle or Greco Roman. And
Okay.
the big difference is in freestyle, you can attack the person's legs, and in Greco Roman, you can only attack the upper body. So I
Okay.
did a style where you can take the person down by the legs and then work from there.
Okay. Cool. 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 And then you did judo when you were in Japan.
Yeah, and then I did it for another year or so back in Seattle too.
Oh, fun, fun.
Yeah,
That's cool
just
for me too, because I did judo in high school, and I also
nice.
did. I used to live in Korea, and
Oh,
I
cool.
did taekwondo for a few years in Korea as well.
Yeah, yeah. Forgive my uber American pronunciation of
Oh, no, 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 no problem.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I learned, yeah, so I mean, so I always find this very interesting. I used to box a bit in high school too, so I mean, I'm always a geek for, like, now I do nothing aside from podcasting and drinking beer and stuff. So,
Yeah, those are
um,
good things.
yeah, these are good things too, but not quite as in the shape I used to be. But so whenever I hear things about like different types of martial arts and stuff, I geek out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you've had a background. You have a background. It sounds like most of your life and different types
Yep.
of fighting styles. You said your mother was a karate instructor, and
Yes.
so you did that. I have not done that yet. I hope to, someday
Hmm.
do some karate. So you do have the background. So you had the idea of this kind of a narrative or a story of this character called the Half-Assed Dragon. Um,
Yes.
so you reached out to a wrestling organization. Now, this wrestling organization, you said, is this kind of a local Nagano specific type organization, kind of a small grassroots kind of wrestling scene thing?
It is a grassroots wrestling scene. It's right now in its 10th year, so there's a lot of big events for the 10th year anniversary. It was started by a wrestler named the Great Mucha, whose idea was to, his catchphrase is to, keep Nagano happy or keep Nagano Genki
Okay.
through this comedic pro wrestling. And it's a pretty much volunteer group of wrestlers. And the premise behind it is to not risk the guys with these, crazy neck breaking moves, but to just kind of poke fun at the whole idea of a staged wrestling fight. So it's very much transparent. And if you're into theater, you could say that they break the fourth wall, or if you're into wrestling, you could say that they break kayfabe.
Hmm. Okay, so I want to go back to a couple of things you said. Okay, number one,
Hmm.
you mentioned comedic wrestling, and then
Yes,
you also mentioned kind of most of the people, or the people doing it are volunteers. So,
yes.
so I could not refer to you as a professional wrestler.
You could refer to me as an amateur professional wrestler,
Okay, and
which is,
so
a bit of a contradiction, but
so
that's
you're
that's
you're you're
the
doing that kind of pro wrestling style, but you're not getting paid for it.
exactly, exactly.
Right on, right on. Now, what is comedic wrestling?
You know, to me, pretty much, to be honest, all staged wrestling is somewhat comedic. But the more the kind of secret got out there, and the whole world kind of began to know that pro wrestling is staged,
Yeah.
um, there's just it's branched off into different subgenres, and so some people kind of embrace like that 80s 90s character wrestling where everything is very over the top and flamboyant,
Mm-hmm.
and they just kind of try to make outlandish scenarios, and people kind of get a good laugh at it. um, in Japan, it's even a little bit different, where they actually have people imitate famous professional wrestlers and kind of like mock their moves, or take some of their mannerisms and exaggerate them and things like that.
Hmm. Wow.
So yeah, so I'm an original character, but most of the wrestlers in my league either come out to somebody's intro or copy some of the moves of somebody and kind of do some more inside jokes that people who are real fans of professional wrestling get, which I'm not always aware of, the background of those.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, were you when you were younger? Were you a big fan of professional wrestling?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in high school and when I was a wrestler, even before I was a wrestler, I watched it and I got a kick out of it. And so I had this high school class called the Internet and Beyond, where, this was 1997 and 1998. And we were just learning about the internet. We had to make a GeoCities website. And I just collected clips of Japanese and American pro wrestling. And just all day long, that's basically all I did, was just look for interesting clips.
Nice, nice. My first true memories of wrestling were when we got our first VCR and
Hmm.
my father renting WrestleMania 1. WrestleMania
Oh,
1.
wow. That's the Mr. T, Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I remember how
Yeah.
excited we were, and all like the whole. I grew up in a small town in Eastern Canada. How excited we were and waiting for WrestleMania 2 to come out on VHS.
And of course, Canada is like one of the main countries of professional wrestling. Some of the
Well, I mean,
legends.
I suppose in the '80s we had the Harts, Bret the Hitman
Yep.
Hart, and the Hart family out of Calgary. But I mean,
Hmm.
I haven't followed wrestling. I stopped following wrestling. I kind of dropped it once I think I hit junior high school. Um,
Yeah.
um, as some people do, and other of my some of my friends continued on.
Yeah.
Uh,
I dropped it for a long time um, until I saw that show in Nagano, and then I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I like all of those. That
kind of
enjoyment came back to me.
it kind of reminds me of like many years ago, and I put a video on YouTube. I used to do a lot of YouTube. I see, you guys out there know listening on YouTube. I'm Busan Kevin from Busan, Korea. I'm not from Busan, Korea, but started YouTubing there. But I made a video. I think it was possibly my first year in Japan back in 2008, and I was in Osaka in a place called America Mura, Amemura, just shopping with my wife on a weekend, and like this like all these like vans and trucks showed up, and they quickly set up a kind of like a wrestling stage in this park, and these guys got out and they did this like full on insane like wrestling match with
Hmm.
like jumping off of ladders and hitting each other with ladders and all this craziness that I remember from like the 80s style wrestling, like
Yep.
and basically what they were doing was advertising a big wrestling event that was going to be taking place that night in a different location, and saying, hey,
That is something.
look at this. And they put on this incredible free show for like about 20 minutes or half an hour. And it was like, all right, you like this? We're doing a show here tonight at this place.
Hmm.
And I was just like, wow, that's insane. And I have to admit, I've been pretty impressed. I live here in Kobe, but seeing, you see posters for professional wrestling all over the place.
Hmm.
There's a place, it's called Dragon's Gate, I think is the name of
Yeah,
the
that's
big.
like the EK Men Pro Wrestling League.
Okay. And I know that's something I always see signs all around here, and you'll see like vans on the weekend driving around with like big speakers announcing
Yep.
events and stuff.
Yeah, they tour the country. They're pretty famous and
Is that
well
is that a
renowned
big
group.
league, Dragon's Gate?
It's pretty big, yeah. It's pretty big. Everybody who's into professional wrestling would know them. And
Okay,
their
okay.
style is more like, rather than comedy, it'd be more like really cool looking dudes who just like, you know,
Yeah, it's a pretty
everybody just thinks they're awesome. I don't know
okay.
how to.
Cool, cool.
To me, that yeah,
So what you're doing now? So you
mhm,
you found this league, this kind of like
yep,
local league in Nagano. You reached out to them. Now
yeah,
you're an American guy,
yep.
and you're reaching out to this Japanese wrestling league. What was their how did they react to that?
Well, so I emailed them first, gave them a couple of pictures. Just I don't even remember what the pictures were. Like one of them was from like a punk rock show I did or something, and just said, hey, I've wrestled for 6 years. I played football. I speak Japanese. Can I come in and check out the dojo? They call it a dojo in
Oh,
professional
okay.
wrestling,
Oh,
just
they
like
call
in
it a
martial
dojo.
arts.
Okay.
Yep. So every professional wrestling league in Japan has a dojo, and they invited me. They said, yeah, come on in. And then I talked to them, and they were like, I want you to know that we're just really here just for fun. Our shows are free admission. They're all free admission. Um, we're not kicking each other's asses too hard. You know, we're not like trying to climb the ladder. We're just like basically like going wherever we can in Nagano, doing this thing a little bit tongue in cheek. And so I had to kind of convince them that I was on board with that, that I understood I'm not going to be, trying to like beat people up. And that,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, I am a performer. I'm a comedian. I have this desire to just kind of do funny stuff. And so,
And I've
uh,
noticed I saw some of your videos on your Facebook page, and all of you guys go there and like is your what is your Facebook page, by the way? Let's throw it out there, pimp it out.
okay, Facebook page is Facebook/half-assed dragon.
Okay, so facebook.com/half-assed dragon. Okay,
Yes.
so on your Facebook page, you got some videos up there, and I've seen
Mhm.
you've performed in quite a few different types of venues.
Yeah, that's
Like,
that's one really cool thing about
and
it.
I've looked at some pictures too. Like, I mean, you did an event at a hospital.
Yeah. So my most recent event was in the morning. I went to a hospital. They were having a little festival, and we just put a mat and some rubber rings around the mat,
Hmm.
and the mat's like maybe 6 by 2 feet or something. It's really narrow, and we have people stand in the place of the goalpost and just put up some rubber rings to add the atmosphere. And we go to festivals or to some small local places like that and do these kind of events. And there's people there in wheelchairs. There's people there that are retired and more or less in a nursing home, and their grandkids are there, and we just kind of show up and pretend to beat each other up and do a couple little gags, and they get into it. And then that day, we went back to Nagano and we did a huge event in the old Olympic hockey stadium from the 1998 Olympics
Oh wow.
for about 4,000 people. We had pro guests. Bob Sapp was the biggest name there,
Okay,
and
yeah,
that
yeah.
was a free event for Nagano. So I went from this little tiny hospital event to a full ring with a 20-meter entry ramp and the view screen up in the corner, the jumbotron or whatever.
And for you guys who don't know who Bob Sapp is, he was known as Bob the Beast Sapp.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess how long ago that 15 years ago, 10 years ago when
Yeah.
there was a league called K1, which
Mm-hmm.
was huge in Japan. And I mean, I've been a fight fan for a long time, so I used to watch it when I didn't live in Japan.
Yeah.
And
So
back in the days with like Miro Krokop and him and Mark Hunt, and yeah. So he was just this massive giant American dude who didn't have a whole lot of fighting skills, but
yeah.
was real big and would just go in and wail on people.
Yeah, and he got his start in American football. He was on the Washington Huskies football team. Played in the NFL for a little bit, and he was actually in a developmental the power plant for WCW wrestling back when WCW was a
Oh,
thing,
was he
which I did
really?
not realize. Yeah, I didn't realize that until just the other day when he was in Nagano.
Oh, so that was just so he's not doing the pro fighting anymore, is he?
He's more or less doing pro wrestling, but from what I gathered, he just kind of travels country to country and does what he can. He was in like The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler, so he does movies. He's setting up a kickboxing promotion in Guatemala after he left Nagano.
Oh wow, okay.
So he still travels the world, and I don't know if he actually does paid fights anymore, but he definitely does pro wrestling matches still.
Okay, cool.
And it's much bigger than just Japan, which I didn't realize.
Oh really? Okay. Wow. Okay, so you've been doing this half-ass dragon thing for a year and a half, and
Yep.
um, so I mean, what's a, I mean, how should I say? Okay, how does the training work? How do you learn to do this? Now, I know you train a few nights a week, but like, is it kind of like theater training? You're
It's a
going
lot
in,
of tumbling. It's a lot of tumbling,
yeah.
which a lot of handstands, tumbling, rolls, falls. So the way I best describe professional wrestling, from how I understand it, is you're beating the crap out of yourself and making it look like you're kicking somebody's ass.
Hmm.
So you're like you every time you throw somebody, the
Hmm.
guy the guy getting thrown is doing all the work.
Okay.
So you're basically jumping over and falling down and getting hurt.
Hmm.
Um, so basically, you practice what's called a bump, and that's taking a fall. And so in our practices, usually we just practice falling for the first half hour.
It kind of
We
reminds me of
stretch.
my days in judo.
It's very
When
similar.
I
We do
when
the
I first started
ukemis.
judo, it's like I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to judo. I'm gonna learn how to throw people. Like, no, you're not. Not at first. You're gonna
Yeah.
learn. You're gonna learn how to fall. You're gonna learn break falls.
Yep.
And it was just like that's what we did. And then I even remember like once I got a bit more proficient and moved up a few belt levels, we would start off every night with break fall training.
Yep.
Just you got to
It's
learn.
very
You
similar to judo.
when someone throws you, you got to learn how to fall properly so you don't get hurt.
Yeah, and for us, we focus on safety, so that's really a big deal of it. And then also bouncing off the ropes. There's just running, and you see guys lean on the ropes to build up steam and go from side to side.
So,
So you work
hmm.
on that.
So you okay? So the training, you're doing the tumbling, you're doing this and that. Are you doing any kind of like weight training, cardio training, that kind of stuff as well?
Yeah, I do most of that on my own. So I do weight training pretty regularly now. Cardio training too, but mostly weights because it's honestly not. I'm not a pro or anything. And I've got my teaching. I'm a pretty dedicated teacher, and I've got two children of my own. So basically, when I'm at home before work, after work, just doing weight trainings. I've got dumbbells and kettlebells and those kind of things, working on core exercises
Hmm.
to basically enhance the ability to do tumbling and hold people,
So so
hold
there
myself.
so there's something, folks out there in Just Japan podcast land, to mention that Dave is not. I mean, he like he mentioned, he's not getting paid to do this wrestling. So you're actually a full time teacher.
Yeah, I'm on the JET program currently.
Okay, so there you go, guys. I know a lot of you out there listening. We've done some episodes in the past with the Jet program, and now you're like, what? I can do something cool like this if I'm a Jet? Well, maybe some of
Yeah,
you can. And that's
I think the whole thing is just being honest about it. Like when they first found out I was doing it, they were really worried that I was gonna be making money off of it. But then once they really thought about it, and I talked to them about it, like part of the JET contract is getting involved in local cultural exchanges, and the Ministry of Sports, Culture, and Education funds the JET program. So what I'm doing right now is basically a sports and culture exchange.
nice. So
Yeah.
if you are a Jet, we're,
Mhm.
and for those of you out there who don't know, can you very quickly tell folks, if this is maybe their first time listening to the podcast, what is a Jet, or what is a Jet program?
JET is an exchange program through the governments of English-speaking countries in Japan. You come over and you can either call it an assistant teacher or a teacher's assistant in public schools, and you basically can get paid for up to 5 years to teach in Japanese public schools.
Okay, so you're working, you're working teaching in Japanese public schools. So that's a
Yep.
full time job. That's 5 days a week,
Yes.
and you also have a family.
Yes, I do.
And I mean, I'm a dad. I've got a girl who just turned 4 a few days ago. Oh well, May 1st. I've got a son.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. My son who's 6. He's a newly minted Ichinensei first grader. He's going to be 7 soon. So
Hmm.
I know what it's like to have 2 little kids,
It's
and
tough.
it's tough. It's difficult. I mean, for example, right now, guys out there listening, guys and gals out there listening, it's a little after 10 o'clock in the evening when Dave and I are talking, and I would say probably 98% of the interviews I've done over the past 160 episodes have been done after 9 p.m.
Yep.
And when my kids were younger, 9:30 p.m. was the time I always begged people to come on, to do our Skype interviews, because essentially I had to make sure my kids were sleeping before I could do anything.
That's where I am right now.
Yeah, exactly. We're in that situation. So you're doing this. You're doing this training, a few nights a week, right?
Yep.
Um, Plus you're working full time. Plus you got a
Hmm.
family.
Yep.
Um, is it hard to schedule all of this stuff?
It is and it isn't. So when I first got to Nagano, I tried to join the American football team here,
Okay.
and I ended up playing one game with them, and it was fun. But their practices were on Sundays, which Sunday afternoons. It's just a lot to ask of your family to go away every Sunday. So one of the appeals to doing the wrestling is that our practices are 9 p.m. to 11 or 12, uh, Mondays and Thursdays. So I never miss any family time to go to training.
Okay.
And on the weekends, we do events at Matsuris and festivals and family friendly events. So we do them all around Nagano Prefecture. So I invite my family and my kids to come watch it and make a day of it. And so it still is a bit of a commitment, but it's similar to if somebody's in a band or if somebody's in a sport and doing games. So um,
Yeah, no,
it doesn't.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like you're going. These are family friendly events, right? So it's like very cool for
Mhm.
your family to come and hang out.
Yep, and it's all about just coming up with some great stories and pictures to show my grandkids in the future. Honestly,
Yeah, that's
like the more fun and interesting things I can do, it's
so.
going to pay off in the future.
So no, I know the people listening. They're gonna eventually, I mean, you guys are gonna go to facebook.com/halfassdragon,
Please
and
do.
you're gonna go and you're gonna find that link in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com, and you're gonna go like that page. But for those who are listening right now who can't access, the images, what kind of image does the half-ass dragon have? What kind of costume? What kind of theme is going on there?
So it's been a year of performances, and the original character, which I still The original costume and character was kind of a black and red theme with a buzz cut, some big, glasses, sunglasses that would go over regular glasses, so like some oversized sunglasses. Some people would say they look a little bit like the Terminator, but like the real inspiration was Brian Bosworth or the Boz, if anybody's old enough to remember that.
I do.
You do? Okay.
Well, but I'm old.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Maybe
was,
some of the people listening may get upset when they hear that. Well, I'm in my 40s. So there you go.
Yeah. So he was this egomaniac football player who had an earring with his name in it in the '80s and demanded all his money,
and a half-ass acting career
totally
afterwards,
sucked.
right?
So he's the big inspiration of the half-ass dragon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Him in like those '80s action movies. So I came out, and so my first debut match, actually, there was media coverage. 2 local TV networks were covering it from Nagano, like NBS News and SBC News,
Well, are those the videos up on your Facebook page? I watched some videos the other night. Like
some of them are. If they looked like they were from a news crew, then it was from the news. If they looked like it was just the full match, it was probably from
no. There definitely was like a news story.
Yeah,
I watched one with you walking into a place, and it was definitely a news story. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was first they called in a newspaper. And they got a picture of me throwing a guy in a headlock.
Okay.
And they put it on the front page of their news.
Oh, really?
And when I first wanted to do this wrestling, I wanted it to just kind of be a quiet hobby, and if someone found out about it, I'd explain it. But they put this on the front page of a newspaper, and every one of those newspapers went to every public school library in the prefecture. And so my, school and everybody was like, "Hey, was that you throwing a headlock on this person?" And
you're like, yeah, and if you spread the word, I'm gonna do that to you too.
Pretty much, but I threw my desk over before I said that, and jumped on top of it and all that.
Ripped your shirt off and hulked out.
Basically, their big question was, "Am I making money?" And I said no.
Okay, so I'm getting the impression now. I've never worked as a jet or anything like that. So this has come up a few times. If you're working on the jet program, I'm assuming you're not allowed to have an arabaito, a part-time job.
It's a very strict visa.
Oh, is it really? Oh, okay.
So you are not, and I like to respect that. So.
Well, yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm here on a spouse visa and working in a very different type of organization, a private company.
Exactly.
So I have. It sounds like a lot more wiggle room than maybe you do.
Yeah. So that's exactly
okay.
what it is.
So when you're a jet, you're on that you're on that contract, and that visa requires you to only earn income as a jet.
Yeah, and they compensate you pretty decently, better than the average Kiowa. So
yeah, definitely, yeah. Jets do definitely have a much more comfortable package than a typical English teacher would have, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so they were just we're like, wait a second, you making money?
Yeah, and I explained it, and they were cool with it. And then from that newspaper exposure, the guy at the league called the news channels and ended up and in that newspaper they did kind of a history of my Japanese studies and marrying a woman from Nagano, and they gave a little biography of me. So then the news channels wanted to run that story. So two local networks came to the practice and interviewed me. Then they wanted to come to the school and they wanted to interview my family. My wife's very shy. She didn't want anything to do with it. But they did bring a camera crew to my classroom.
Okay.
And I let them come videotape me playing with my kids in the park. And then they came to videotape my debut match. And so I came out with the buzz cut, first like all the footage they were taking was of me as a teacher. I was talking about, I have a master's degree in education. I was talking about my education philosophy, what I like about Japan. Then I come out in this singlet, like a wrestling singlet with these huge sunglasses on and some nunchucks to this heavy metal song that my friend's band made. And just do this ridiculous wrestling performance, and they just loved it, and they each network put on a 15-minute segment.
I was gonna say, man, like I'm thinking right away, the kids in your class, especially if it's a junior high school, like we've got the coolest frickin' teacher ever.
Yeah, I teach high school, and so depending on the school, like some of them, you know how they unfortunately designate schools high level and low level in
Yeah.
Japan,
Yeah.
but some of the more academic schools, it took them a while to kind of like talk to about with the students. But then some of the schools I teach at, they were like, "Hey, can you show them some wrestling moves?" Or like,
And believe me, I don't need to.
here
That's the last thing I should do is teach that kid or that kid how to fight.
exactly.
They're already pretty
So
damn good at it.
right, so
Don't need to make them
it's
better.
yeah, it's been fun to kind of you know not hide it, but but to be able to embrace it a little bit and to use it in
Mhm.
lessons sometimes it's pretty good. It's
Absolutely.
been fun. And then one time uh, we did a little local festival at a shrine, and I came into to work the next Monday, and the vice principal was like, the Kyoto sensei, he was like, "Oh hey, I saw Taki Toryu," and that's the half-assed dragon's Japanese name. And he took out his cell phone and showed me all these pictures. And I wear glasses, but I don't when I'm wrestling. So I have no idea who's like right next to me around the ring. And it turns out that like one of the staff's daughters was one of the ring posts at that match, and the vice principal was there, and they were taking pictures of me and stuff.
Nice.
So,
That's
and,
awesome.
and they got a kick out of it, so it's pretty fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious. Now I think the listeners already and I have kind of already understand that you do speak Japanese and you have
Yes.
you've been studying it for 20 years.
Mhm.
Um, Now when it comes to doing this type of thing, for those who are listening, who are people who are interested in coming to Japan, or they're prospective Jets or prospective whatever it may be, and they're thinking, hey, that sounds really cool, or maybe not wrestling, but I want to get kind of into some kind of Japanese organization or group when I come to Japan, if I do come to Japan to work or teach or live or study. Um, you know, do you need to speak Japanese to be able to do this sort of thing? And
I
be
think
honest.
the more Japanese you know, the better experience you'll have.
Hmm.
Like if you're want to play in a band and you're just this amazing guitar player, you can probably get by with very little Japanese. If you everybody knows music, but any Japanese you have will just make your experience better. For me, my Japanese is pretty good, but there's still times where I'm just not getting through what I want to say, or people are just because my Japanese isn't perfect, and they'll like assume that some of my wrestling is also not that good, or like because my Japanese isn't good, maybe I'm not that smart or something. Just some of those. Anytime you're in a non-dominant language situation, you get a little bit of that. Um, those type of impressions.
I suppose you
So
also get the kind of general that the kind of typical nervousness that Japanese people have. Sometimes if they're maybe they don't speak English or they speak a
yeah,
little bit and they're not comfortable, so they may be worried that they can't communicate with you, so they may
yes.
feel uncomfortable. So I think
There's not a single fluent English speaker in the Shinshu Wrestling League.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
So the more language you have, the more Japanese you have, the better experience you will have, I assume.
yeah. That being said, if you don't have any Japanese, you can pick it up, um, and a lot of organizations will have an English speaker who maybe likes speaking English and teaching in English. So in my particular situation, I couldn't get by without Japanese.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I suppose when it comes down to it, I mean, and the more time you spend with Japanese people who don't speak English, the more you're going to learn
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and be more motivated. I mean, I've got a friend who has never formally studied Japanese. He's been here for a
Hmm.
long time, but he's a very serious martial artist, judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's got a black belt in both, which he both
Yep.
earned here in Japan,
Oh wow.
and very seriously trains. And I mean, his his Japanese is pretty good, and he just learned it because he spent years and years training with a lot of guys who don't speak English.
Hmm.
So you get
That's
in there and you'll learn, right?
yeah. And I don't want to discourage people because you know the other thing I hear about people who want to come to Japan is some people get the impression that some teachers live here for a long time and never learn Japanese, and they feel that's disrespectful. And then they say, "Oh well, I have to learn Japanese before I go to Japan." But you're never going to learn everything you need to know before you get here. So if you want to come to Japan and you're serious about teaching or about learning Japanese, I would say just do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose one might say that the best place to learn Japanese is in Japan.
Yeah, and there's that whole thing with like the Bob Sapp and the big in Japan and people saying, "Oh, you're doing that in Japan. It's easy to do something in Japan." But the only place in the world where I can speak Japanese every day and be a Japanese comedic pro wrestler, amateur pro wrestler is in Japan.
Absolutely.
So if that's where people want to go, it's fine to come here and work on the skills once you're here.
Very cool. Very cool. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'm curious. Do you ever have any aspirations now to become a professional wrestler?
I absolutely love professional wrestling. I've always wanted to do it. I've never really had the chance until now. I'm 37 years old, and it's definitely uh, a sport or an activity that wears on your body.
Ah, yes.
And like I said, I also have a master's in teaching. So in terms of going full pro, like I did one match where we were guests at the All Japan Pro Wrestling match, and talked to some of the wrestlers, and they're on the road 5 nights a week, and my children are really the top priority. So in terms of being like a full-time pro wrestler, I just don't think it would ever be realistic. But like if I were ever to get to the point where I could do a show and get a few bucks for it, yeah, sure, I would totally do that. But right now, obviously, that's not something I could do.
I suppose being a full time professional wrestler is like being a full time touring musician. Only your
I
body,
think it's
only your
yeah,
body's getting pounded.
yeah, and I think it's more like that than it is like being an athlete, honestly. Unless maybe baseball, who plays like 160 games a year. But if you're talking about the guys in the WWE, they're on the road like 330 days out of the year or something like that.
Wow. So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was a really great story. I definitely, after 160 episodes of the podcast, have not had anything like it.
Great.
So, really
Can I
appreciate
can I
it.
plug one big show?
Absolutely. Please plug away.
So if anybody's interested in seeing this very unique Shinshu Pro Wrestling, on November 26th, it's a little ways away, but November 26th in Big Hat, it's in Nagano City. We're going to have the great Muta, who's one of the most famous names in the history of pro wrestling on
Nice.
any continent. He's going to come do a show, free admission. Uh, Follow me at Half-Assed Dragon at Facebook, and I'll be posting like crazy leading up to that show. So
Cool, 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 guys. So, um, you hear that? That's in November. Big show coming up. A few months away, but go follow the Half-Assed Dragon on Facebook. And again, the link will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. Go follow him. Go like that page, and you'll know when it's going to happen. Dave, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Well, hey, I want to thank Dave for taking the time to stop by the Just Japan podcast for episode number 160. That was a great interview. What a great story. Go to the Half-Assed Dragons Facebook page, follow him, and see what he's doing. There's also going to be a link in the show notes, of course, to his Facebook page and the wrestling league that he participates in. There'll be information there about that wrestling league. Go check it out. It's all there. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah. I mean that was a lot of fun. And again, like I always mention, one of the awesome things about doing the Just Japan podcast is each week I get to meet different cool people who are doing very cool thing. So by the way, he is a member of the Shinshu Wrestling Federation. So there will be links to the Shinshu Wrestling Federation website as well as Dave's Facebook page, facebook.com/halfassdragon, and his On and Off Again blog. That's right, which is called Climbing the Ropes at blogspot.com.jp. So again, all those links will be in the show notes, which is really cool. And there'll be some pictures in there too of him doing some wrestling. Very cool. So again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Dave. It was awesome. All right, folks, remember, you can always email me, Kevin O'Shea, here at the Just Japan Podcast at justjapanpodcast@gmail.com. You got questions? We'll have some answers. Maybe. You can always find me on YouTube at Busan Kevin. That's right. On Twitter at JLandKev. On Instagram at JLandKev. The Facebook page is, of course, at Just Japan Stuff. So facebook.com/Just Japan Stuff. And check out my new Facebook page, Bugs of Asia. Nice. All these links will be in the show notes, folks. I hope you are having a great week wherever you are. The summer months are, well, I'd say pretty much here. It's bloody hot here in Japan. And humid. It's getting humid. Oh, it's the worst part of it all. How are things where you are? Hope they're good. Hope you're doing well. No, seriously. I want to thank each and every one of you guys out there for listening to this episode. I do the show for you. I make it happen because you guys want to hear cool content about Japan. So, of course, you can always support the show by simply just sharing the links around in your social media. That would really help. I'm hoping to get a few t-shirts out on teespring.com soon. A couple of different Just Japan Podcast promotional shirts, not just with the logo, but with some other cool things, hopefully in the near future. And that would be, there's a great way for you guys to support the show when the t-shirts come out. To buy a t-shirt, you get something really cool, and it helps support the show. So there you go, folks. That's it for another week of the Just Japan Podcast, episode number 160. Done. Stick a fork in it. It's done. All right, guys. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I am a Canadian living and working here in Kobe, Japan. Each week, I bring to you another podcast episode, another show. That's right. And there's another one right there. So thanks for listening. Wherever you are in the world, guys, I hope you're happy. Hope you're healthy. And I'll be talking to you real soon.